new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 8 of Arkansas Preps Weekly. My name is Kyle Sutherland alongside the softball guru Jared Hawthorn. And it is regional week / the last week of the regular season if you are 5 or 6A, but wrapped up districts, actually the rest of them this week. And actually, as we're recording on a Monday night, we still got one to go between Wonderview and Nemo Vista. That had already started, and so they'll resume play on Tuesday is what it's looking like at 2 o'clock. But Jared, we hadn't talked a lot about weather this year, really, compared to, I think last year I started every episode starting with that, but it's not been as big of a factor, I feel like, as much as it normally is. But, of course, it really affected district, the ones that didn't get those games in on late Friday and Saturday. So we got into this week. It's looking like it could affect regionals. Initially, the weather report showed that it's going to be rain pretty much all week. That obviously didn't quite happen because it just mainly rained a little bit on Monday. But really what I'm getting to, we're just trying to make sure that we can get through this without it bleeding in to next week, and we can just focus on state only.
So I think we're going to get a little bit of regionals in, and then it's going to get really dicey for a few days. So I'm not sure how they're going to sort that out. And looking at how they handled some of the districts, it was definitely interesting there. Some of them got completely through. Some of them finished playing. Some didn't finish. Some got reverted back to original seeding after they were half played. Didn't seem to be a lot of rhyme to reason to a few of them. I'll just leave it at that. But there's definitely some controversy over how some of them finished up and how the seeding was decided. But it is what it is, and we're going to move into regionals for this week. So there should be some really good matchups.
Yeah, that's one of the unfortunate things I talked about last week, that weather and injuries this time of year especially, that's going to – any team that's playing at this point, you're going to deal with one or possibly both. But there were some unfortunate situations. You think about the 3A7, which that wasn't necessarily all too terrible because you had the top 4 seeds that made the semifinals. That really wasn't that hard to figure out. Now, the 3A5 definitely was tricky because Baptist Prep did beat Atkins, but like you said, the game started with Mayflower. Gosh, I mean, we were dang near through 5 innings, and so you almost got a complete game there, and then things didn't work out. So I know there was some controversy there, and pretty much just from what I gathered, it seemed like that the field was about as bad as it could be. But like you said, there's only so much that we know and have heard and all that. So all that we do know is that basically regionals are set other than the 1A4. So we'll go through real quick. Before we get into the quick notes from the 5 and 6A, the big classes, I wanted to remind you guys, if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe and also hit that notification button. We do release episodes at the beginning of each week, usually Monday, Tuesday, kind of just depending on the situation. Obviously, like with this one, what we've seen with weather. But that'll make sure, if you turn on the notification, that'll make sure that you know it whenever we release an episode. You can also subscribe on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whichever audio forum you prefer to listen. So before we do get started with that too, I also want to remind you about Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, our friends over in Sherwood. A properly graded infield is not only important for player safety, but the field's health. No company in the state can match the exceptional service and dedication like our friends at Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. From infield renovation, lip removal and edging, mound rehab, laser leveling, and much more, Jeremy Rice and his crew have you covered. Call Jeremy today, 501-416-1218. That's 501-416-1218 for your free evaluation and consultation. You can also check them out on Facebook or see what they have to offer on their website by searching Athletic Field Service of Arkansas online. Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, we got the dirt on your infield. In Class 6A, starting it off, Rogers beat Bentonville 2-1 on Thursday. Also, Rogers had beaten the Lady Tigers in the season opener on February 27th. So, Jared, I don't remember when it was, but before this year, it had been a while since Rogers had beaten Bentonville. Well before COVID, since it had probably happened. They beat them by a run each in both of those conference games. Rogers can wrap up the West this week, and Bryant can wrap up the Central. They beat Cabot 12-6, and with a win over North Little Rock or Conway, they'll wrap up the Central Conference. So a little bit what we expected. We definitely thought when we did that first preview pod that Bryant would be standing on top of the Central when it was all said and done. It's going to be all said and done in terms of the regular season by the end of this week. And then we had a feeling that it was probably going to be between Rogers and Bentonville. We knew in the West. We knew that Rogers had that experienced team coming back with a deep arsenal of pitching. Not so much the case with Bentonville. They had a stud pitcher in Ryan Sanders. They had another Division I signee in Amber Turner. But other than that, it was all pretty much youth. And as we've talked about, the freshmen and sophomores have really stepped up for the Lady Tigers. But right now in the West, it has been Rogers' time. And like I said, those were those three teams right there between Bentonville, Bryant, Rogers, whatever order you want to put them in. And those are the ones that are playing the best ball in Class 6A right now.
Well, there's not been a lot of surprises in 6A. Been a lot of what we expected and who we expected from the season start to all the way through. But Bentonville, as much youth as they do have, has really started to compete and been really close, like 2-1 losses, things like that with Rogers. So I mean, they're right there, and when you get to state tournament, anything can happen. So you never know what'll happen when you get down the road. But we've said all along, or I know we said this several times, that Rogers was kind of who we expected. Bryant was kind of who we expected. So so far hasn't been a huge surprise in what's played out. There've been a few upstarts. When you start getting on down to the third and fourth spots, for sure, but definitely just not a ton of surprises. A lot of great talent in all of those programs. When you start looking up and down through 6A, there's just a lot of talent on every one of those rosters, and so it's definitely not lineups that I would want to have to face down through about the fourth spot in each one of those.
I forgot to unmute my mic again. Down in 5A, a few notes there before we get into regionals. So Sheridan, they locked up the South Conference, the very, very tough South Conference last week. Greenwood they pretty much have the West locked up. I think if they win one game this week, but they are about 2.5 ahead, and they've got Greenbrier, a doubleheader in the East. Searcy, who was swept last week by GAC, they've got Valley View on Tuesday, a big matchup, and then GCT has a doubleheader against Marion. So Marion, I believe, is actually out of the playoff race. They're 2.5 games back, I think they're actually a half game back of the fourth spot, but it's looking like that they're not going to make it. I might have had that completely off. I was looking at it earlier, but I know that them and who was it for the fourth spot? Maybe Nettleton. That was kind of the two that were going neck and neck, and I believe the Nettleton has pulled away there. So pretty much in the East, it's looking like that it's going to be, as long as GCT takes care of its business after they got swept. GCT swept Searcy last week. So if they take care of business, hope that Searcy can do some things, then the East will be there. So I know that was really confusing. But also in the Central, that's the one that we're definitely going to have to talk about. So we talked a lot about BB over the past couple of weeks, Jared. I think that pretty much everybody knows exactly what they have right now. They've had pitching, and now they picked the bats up last week against Maumelle in a doubleheader. Maumelle had won 10 consecutive games. So in those two games, BB had 22 total hits, 12 in one and then 10 in the other. So the bats really got going. They stay that consistent. And I need to probably just reconfirm or re-say that, because I don't want to say that they haven't hit well. What I was meaning is against, like, they've hit well against some of the lower tier conference opponents, some of the teams that they should have beaten. That has happened, and that's what as far as getting the bats go and doing what they need to do. But there has been plenty. I know that Valley View is one of those in that pitcher's duel. They've had quite a few pitcher's duels and low-scoring games has BB. But if they get the bats going, they're really about as dangerous as anybody in 5A. But I'll also point out, too, in that same Central Conference, and BB's got them on Tuesday night, so Tuesday night probably when you're listening, when this will be released, they've got a Valonia team that has won 9 consecutive games. Jared, obviously, Valonia is a very storied program. I talked to Coach Sullivan before the season, and I want to say it was 22, 23 years. He said that he was going to be about as light as he's ever been in the circle, and they've had to work some things out. But if you look at their losses, even from the beginning, of course, they also, for the second year in a row, they lost their stud middle infielder, Lila Toll, that's going to Baylor. She was out for last season, and then, like I said, happened this year too. So they've had to battle through quite a bit. They're playing, it seems like, their best ball at the best time. They've got a big-time challenge in BB right before that, not only just for conference, for a conference game, but really just to get another good look before the state tournament. So definitely have to give it. And we'll talk a little bit more about Valonia, kind of seeing how this week goes on into the state tournament, because I do want to talk about some sleepers, especially once we get into next week. But hadn't talked a lot about the Valonia Lady Eagles this year. I know we started the season talking about Sylvan Hills, of course, BB, but they are playing some really good softball right now.
Well, looking at BB, and we were talking about their hitting, they definitely had not hit great against the better pitching earlier in the year. And that had been a topic of conversation with even within their own groups, that they had to get the bats going. And so they had strong pitching with Lexi Delaney and Jordy Leopard all year. Had really had pretty solid defense all year, but they were struggling a little bit hitting against the better pitching. But definitely found it, a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and especially against Maumelle, really found their bats. If they can continue to do that, BB's looking really strong there. Valonia is definitely on a good run right now. They have a lot of talent there, just a lot of ability. So we'll see what happens with that this week. It might make for some interesting storylines for sure as we get through this week.
Then on down to 4A as we start talking about regionals. First thing I had in my notes is I wanted to give credit to the Bauxite Lady Miners. We've talked a ton about Benton this year. We talked a lot about Bryant. Bauxite is another one of those Saline County teams that's just in the mix every single year. I mean, I think every year that I've done rankings, they've started in my top 3 and probably ended in the top 5. But they've really been rolling. I know they lost to Cabot, but they lost to a 6A state title contender. Not really too going to hold that against them. But within a week, Jared, they beat both Sheridan. I know that we talked about it last week about how they got Sheridan coming off of Bryant, but still – you can't take anything away from them. And in a week, getting wins over not just 2 of the top 5A South teams, but 2 of the top 5A teams in Benton and Sheridan, I really like, especially with what they have at the plate. We've talked about 100 times about what they can do with their bats. But I really think, too, kind of the opposite of what we've said about BB, since we were just talking about BB a second ago. I really believe that if Bauxite, if their pitching can match they're hitting on a more consistent basis, then there is no telling what kind of damage they can do. They always tend to go deep. I think, what was it, the quarters or semis that they made it to last? I think it was actually the semifinals that they made it to last year. They're going to make a deep run just about every year, at least be in the threat or threatened for it. So with what they did against Benton, with what they did against Sheridan, the tough schedule that they played overall, they've beaten some really good teams this year. So certainly can't forget about them. I know that Benton and Bryant tend to get the most love out of Saline County, but those Bauxite Lady Miners are certainly a force to be reckoned with amongst those 4A1 teams that we talked about so many times in Class 4A.
Bauxite has played extremely good ball over the last week or two. They've looked really strong. Their hitting for sure has been there. The pitching has been good for the last couple of weeks, and it's been good on and off all year. It's only honestly been bad, or not even bad, but maybe just a little off a couple of times against some tough competition. it's been solid all year. If they kind of like what you said, if they can get just a little bit more consistency and get those, get the defensive side to match up to their hitting, they are absolutely poised to make a deep run, and they could very easily get all the way to the state championship. And there's 4A is just really, to me, seems deeper than normal this year. When you look up north, there's some really great teams. In the central part of the state, there's some really great teams. A couple good ones in the western part, and there's 2 or 3 good 4A teams in South Arkansas. So, I mean, everywhere you look, there's quality in 4A. Probably, I would say it's probably 5 to 6 good quality teams better than it has been in the past.
Well, then you go over to that east part of the state that is matched up against Bauxite and the 4A5. So Region 3, Region 5, they will play their regional, which is the Central, at Robinson this week. And the Wynn Yellow Jackets won the 4A3 district. This is the second year in a row. And, Jared, this time last year when Wynn won the 4A3 district tournament, we're talking about, hey, this is a team that in a way came out of nowhere, but also they were just less than a month or about a month removed from the devastating tornadoes that ripped through there. So it made it an even better story, just the fact that they were able to do that. And again, I mean, maybe in their area, the state they were, but before the season, weren't really talking about them. Normally you're talking about Jonesboro Westside, you're talking about Brooklyn, teams like that. But for the second year in a row, they won their district championship 6-0 over Jonesboro Westside this time around. So Westside was actually the last 4A team that had beaten Wynn on, I believe it was April 4th. And then they came back and I believe Wynn actually also won the regular season, or they got second. But for pretty much the last month and a half, or really about, I guess you could say, all year. And when I was doing radio segments, for the last couple of months, it was kind of like who was going to come out on top of that Region 3 conference was Brooklyn, Westside, those names I just mentioned, or Wynn. And Wynn was actually the one that went the furthest in the state tournament last year. They lost to Ashdown in the quarterfinals. Brooklyn, they gave Nashville everything it wanted in the first round, and then things, of course, didn't go well. Well, I mean, Jonesboro Westside, they hung with Malvern, but it was a high score 13-10 loss, late there at the late round first game, or late night first round game. So really remains to be seen. Talking about that talent that seems like it's a little bit deeper than maybe it normally is. You look at that East Regional, so you've got the matchups in the first round from the top to bottom. Wynn, Little Rock Christian, Heber and Brooklyn, and then on the other side you've got Bauxite, and then Southside Batesville, and then Westside, Jonesboro, and Clinton. Jonesboro, Westside, and Clinton. Brooklyn Heber, out of all those, is probably the most interesting one. We've known, and I've said this 100 times, that, and you've mentioned it, if Madison Woolger's at Brooklyn, if she is at her best in the circle at the plate, Heber has been one of those teams that's been somewhat of a surprise. Definitely one of the more improved teams. Mentioned them, did a big segment on them a couple of weeks ago. I think that's probably the first one that I look at in the first round of that regional and say, okay, this could be one that it's going to be a shame that one of these teams is going to miss the state tournament, but probably the best matchup on paper.
Yeah, I was looking while you were talking. I was looking at that regional and the matchups, and I don't know that I would want to try to pick one team over the other in any of the 4 matchups in that regional. I mean, there's 8 teams there that are all capable of winning that first round matchup. But in that Heber Brooklyn, definitely a lot of talent in both those programs. There's definitely not a lot of a separation in the ability there. Brooklyn is loaded with big time players. And then you look at Heber, and they've got 2 pitchers who have been really efficient this year. I think it's the Youngblood girl and the Parker girl have been very efficient for them in the circle. And I actually asked a couple other opposing coaches that played them this year, hey, what's the story on Heber? What do they got? And what are we needing to talk about when we do talk about them? And that was the thing that I heard several times was their 2 pitchers are really efficient. Even they don't necessarily overpower anybody, but they have like good spin, or they have great control, or they're able to get the job done. Heber's defense has done well, but their hitters, I've heard time after time that Heber's hitters are 1 through 9 deep, like they can all hit. And I've heard that from 3 or 4 different coaches that have played them this year. That from when you look at Heber, like there's just not an easy out in the mix. Like you've got to work at every single out. So Brooklyn has a lot of ability and talent, and I've got a lot of faith in what they can do. Madison Woolridge is absolutely a very talented kid. Ashlyn McNeese is a really good hitter and lots of power there. There's a lot of firepower in that group for sure. But man, it's going to be a good matchup and probably a really good ball game. Probably be one of those that I feel like, I don't know why, but I feel like that may be like a 9-8 ball game or something. I don't think it's going to be a really low scoring game. Not knocking any of the pitchers or anything, but I just feel like
I agree with you.
I
agree with you. I think this is probably going to be pretty high scoring and very close.
Yeah, lots of firepower in the lineup, so there's probably going to be some runs scored in that. Could easily be down to extra innings in like a 10-9 or 9-8 ball game, something like that. And then when you look at Wynn and Little Rock Christian, there's Little Rock Christian still has a lot of talent, ability, and could upset anybody. Gwen Hall has been exceptional for them this year. I think she hit a home run earlier tonight against Malvern. She's a very good pitcher. She holds that team, in competitive games with a lot of people. Bauxite Southside, we've already mentioned how much, firepower Bauxite has, and Westside Clinton. I would have to flip a coin to say who I thought might pull that one out. So there's a lot of good matchups, a lot of parity in that regional for sure.
And talking about a stacked regional, and this isn't really shocking at all. The question is probably for the North, which is going to be held at Morrilton, will Region 1 sweep it? So now that Morrilton beat Pottsville 8-4 on Monday afternoon, evening, whatever you want to call it. So it's going to be Pottsville Gentry, Farmington Mena, Pea Ridge Clarksville, and then Pottsville and Gravett. That is a stack. Talk about Mena here for a second. Jared, I think last year they got matched up against Gravett or maybe it was Farmington. I can't remember. Tough break because Mena's a good team, and you get matched up with that. And I'm not saying that they can't beat them. I'm just saying that's a really, really tough draw 2 years in a row.
Well, another lineup with a lot of firepower is Farmington. Yeah. And so if Mena is going to be able to have a chance to win that, Abby Copeen's got her work cut out for her when it comes to seeing that lineup for sure. It is definitely a tough draw. Pottsville Gravett will be a really good ball game in my opinion. I would definitely have to favor Gravett a little bit in that just because everybody in the one is just so tough and they just go at each other all year. It's I always kind of equate them to like the SEC West, in football.
That's it.
That group is just loaded with talent up there. And so it very well could be a sweep by the one, but I wouldn't put anything past against, any of those other teams because they're scrappy. Morrilton's scrappy, Mena's scrappy. Pottsville scrappy, not trying to leave anyone out. Clarksville is not just a pushover team. So they're all, gonna do their best to try to find a way to get a win. But I wouldn't want to have to face anybody out of the 4A1 there.
No, because Gravett, Pea Ridge, Farmington all have been pretty consistent, and all those top 4 teams have. Gentry's been the one that slipped a little bit against really good teams. Let's make sure we throw that in there. So that's probably the one that I'm looking at the most. I think I feel pretty confident about Farmington over Mena. I feel very confident about Pea Ridge over Clarksville. Gravett and Pottsville, to think that one of those two teams is going to miss out on the state tournament, especially Gravett, the defending state champion, possibly that happening, is crazy to me. But with Gentry, I'm like, okay, are they going to respond? Are they going to get back to what they had? Because, look, Gentry, even last year, we knew that they had a pretty solid squad, much better than their record. I know that they were even younger than they are now, and they're still pretty young. But that's my biggest question because you've got a Morrilton team that is really hot right now. probably didn't expect them, maybe other than outside their locker room or outside their campus, probably didn't even expect them to win the district tournament. But Gentry, I think probably when you put up roster to roster, you put up production to production, Gentry has the edge. So it's really a matter of, are they going to pick it back up to what they were? Because again, they are in a slump, and Morrilton is not. So that's the biggest question right there. I think I feel pretty confident about those other 3 games, but can Morrilton stay hot and shock Gentry and keep them out of the state tournament, or is Gentry going to get back to their ways and end the run currently by Morrilton?
Well, when you talk about Gentry, they have the ability to beat anybody at any time, and they gave P Ridge everything they wanted last week. And I think that game ended up maybe 7-6.
What, it 9 innings
it,
or something?
Yeah, 7-6 in 9 innings, something like that. So they proved that they can play with the heavyweights for sure. That they took it down to the wire and almost beat P Ridge. Just definitely, if they can kind of find that mojo they had the night that they played P Ridge, they can probably play with anybody in the state. So I kind of like you. Everyone else there, I think the one has a little bit of the upper hand, and in that one, I kind of feel like Gentry has the upper hand, but they're going to have to show that they're consistent enough to do to play the way that they played last week against P Ridge. And if they do that, then Morrilton will have their hands full with them for sure.
And then also want to touch on the South Regional, which will be held at Futrell Field in Nashville. So the nightcap, Star City Ashdown, is the one that I'm looking at. Talking about just a second ago with Gentry and Morrilton. Gentry, the team that's been kind of slipping. Morrilton, the one that's been trending up. It's kind of been like that with Ashdown and Star City for the most part. I know Ashdown, they were, I want to say it was 2-2 with like through 3, 4, 5 innings, something like that against Nashville the other night. Nashville ended up pulling away. But Ashdown, as I've talked about, that's kind of been the team that last year they went to the 4A semifinals after bumping up in classification the year before. They won a state championship in Class 3A, and they just tend to play their better ball later on in the season. Star City, they started off really good. They were in the Super 7, 6-7 outside looking in range. They've kind of been a little bit inconsistent down the stretch. So that's another one right there that I'm looking at, because I look at the other matchups. Monticello, Magnolia, I feel pretty solid about the Billies in that one. Malvern, Hamburg, I like the Leopards to roll. And then Nashville over Warren, I like the Scrapperettes. I feel like that those are on paper some fairly lopsided games. I mean, I think that Monticello, Malvern, and Nashville, I'll say it, I think they're the superior teams in those. But with Star City and Ashdown, I don't know. That's probably the one that you look at their overall season schedules. And again, it's sort of like Gentry and Morrilton. It's just really about who's playing better right now and can the other team do something about it.
Well, it's a little bit about who's playing better right now, and it's also a little bit about who's healthier right now. And a little bit I've heard from other people around, I'm not sure that either one of them are fully healthy right now. I think they both have some injuries. They both have a little bit they're dealing with. Star City definitely, from what I heard, had a few injuries, but maybe are getting, their players back healthy and ready to go again, kind of getting a few back that missed a few games, that kind of thing. Ashdown is historically a really strong program for sure. With Ashdown, they've kind of been up and down this year. They looked, not great a couple times, and then they beat a couple of good solid teams and looked like kind of the Ashdown of old, and then they kind of had a couple mediocre games in there, and I don't know. I'm kind of on a roller coaster with Ashdown this year. They look good. They don't look great. They look good, So trying to figure them out, and I don't know if they have figured themselves out yet either. But Star City definitely had a strong showing early in the year. They have played a lot of good competition. Star City has. So they haven't necessarily beat a lot of good competition, but they've been close in a lot of games with really good teams and gave several really 2 or 3 powerhouses they took down to the wire and lost by 1 or 2 runs. So Star City has the chance to kind of be the upstart here and have a chance to knock off, the historically better program in Ashdown.
Before we head down to 3A, I want to remind you guys about our friends at Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. A properly graded infield is not only important for player safety, but also the field's health. No company in the state of Arkansas can match the exceptional service and dedication like our friends at Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. From infield renovation, lip removal and edging, mound rehab, laser leveling, and much more, Jeremy Rice and his crew have you covered. Call Jeremy at 501-416-1218. That's 501-416-1218 for your free evaluation and consultation, or you can check them out on Facebook or see online what they have to offer by searching Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. Athletic Field Service of Arkansas, we got the dirt on your infield. Down in Class 3A, let's start it right there with the Region 1, the 3A1 Regional. Always a really tough one, especially the last 3 years. Jared, you've got 3 Division 1 pitchers in this one. So you got Hackett, Elkins, Valley Springs, Charleston, Lincoln, Paris, Boonville, and Flippin. And, of course, those pitchers that I'm talking about, you got Mackenzie Freeman at Atkins, the Tulsa commit. Then you've got at Boonville, Lexi Franklin, of course, the defending state champions and the defending 3A state tournament MVP, who is going to Pittsburgh State, Lexi Franklin is. And then she's a senior, of course, and then junior Brinkley Morton from Lincoln that is going to Mississippi State, currently committed to the Bulldogs. So Lincoln and Boonville, assuming that they beat their opponents in the first round, they are going to square off in the semifinals. And, Jared, let's call it what it is. There's not a whole lot of love lost between these two teams. If you look at just the past couple of years in particular, I know Brink and Lex have had some incredible matchups. And then also, too, whoever of those two teams, assuming, again, that they both take care of business, and you get them versus possibly Hackett, this is always one of the regionals, at least over the past few years, that everybody has looked forward to if you're a small school or a 3A fan.
Well, I like the potential matchup of Lincoln and Boonville. Two amazing pitchers there that'll go toe to toe and circle for that. Not to say that they couldn't both easily get beat, but if they take care of what you think they would, and they get each other there in the second round, it will be really good matchup with two great pitchers. And then when you look at the lineups, there's 3 or 4 really strong hitters on each of those teams. So, there's some kids that can do damage from in the batter's box. Be a lot of fun to watch that. I don't know that I would make a prediction on who would win that game. I'd probably get yelled at from people on both sides, but I think it would be a really good matchup. Probably, in my opinion, maybe like a 5-4 game, kind of not super low scoring, but not high scoring, something like that. And then on the other side of the bracket, to me, Hackett looks strong. They've really been taking care of business. I don't know that I've seen a lot of like super strong competition that they've played so far. They've had a lot of games that seem really lopsided. But they definitely have a lot of talent. Mackenzie Freeman is just an amazing talent for sure. So whoever does get there, if Hackett takes care of business and gets on across, it's going to be a really good ball game in that championship too.
Yeah, I've talked to a few different coaches in 3A who I will not name over the past few weeks. It's all been good things. I say that kind of facetiously, but I've been talking with some about these 3 teams exactly, talking about Lincoln, Boonville, and Hackett. And that's obviously you're going to talk about Boonville. They're the defending champions. 2 of those coaches that I talked to 4 of them, and they both said, look, if anybody's playing better than Hackett in 3A right now, I'd like to see who it is. So that tends to kind of be like one of the favorites right now, Hackett, in that conference. And like I said, you can't ever forget about the defending champion Boonville. But I think Lincoln might be the one that we tend, not you and I, but just in general, tend to forget about the most, just because they did lose in the first round last year. And I know Brinkley has really battled some injuries, particularly, around like mid-March on into April, and seems to be pretty healthy now. But look, I mean, it's pretty much the same as it's been the whole time. And like you said, Lincoln is not short of talent, but they go as Brink goes. She's just that special of a player. And, not to again, just put everything on her. But again, when you have that kind of talent, Mackenzie Freeman, a Claire Womack at Riverside, a Allison Edwards at Mansfield, when you have that kind of an Emery Bolin at Pea Ridge, you go as that player goes. So assuming that Brink doesn't get intentionally walked in the state tournament or regionals or whatever, then there's no telling what there's no telling what Lincoln can do. But I think that tends to be the forgotten team. Lincoln is, just because, again, they lost in the first round last year. Brinkley has battled that injury, but anytime that she is on, certainly in the circle, at the plate, but you've got a chance. And they're right there up there with the best of them. I think that you've got to put them in there with Hackett and the Boonvilles, again, when she is at their best and they follow that.
Well, as much as I'm not a fan of intentional walks, it is a tool, and it is something that you have to use as a coach sometimes. Now, using it 5 times in a game is a little excessive, in my opinion. If nothing else, just throw stuff that's out of the zone and make them chase if they want to chase. But, the five intentional walks in a game, I kind of struggle with. But Brinkley Morton may set an all-time state record for intentional walks as a player, because she has been intentionally walked a lot. There's a lot of people that are scared to throw to her, period. And not that I blame them, because she can absolutely just destroy a softball. She can hit it over the fence with the best of them. And so it'll be interesting to see if pitchers in this regional for sure decide to throw to her, or if it's try to throw around her, or if they're going to put her on base a lot, So I would like to see that they at least try to throw around her and make her chase pitches or something. But I don't blame them for doing what they got to do to win either. So it's a catch-22. You don't blame a coach for doing what you got to, and you don't. From the competitive side of me, I'd like to see let the kids decide it between a pitcher and a hitter. So it'll be fun to watch, see what happens with it.
And then also, I'll tell you what, I'll just give you my main reactions that I had from around the other 3 regionals, and then I'll throw it at you, and I'll let you respond to that and then add anything to it. So the 3A2 regional, which is going to be at Rivercrest, I have a strong feeling that one's going to come down to Melbourne and Salem. And they played 3 times already this year, all one-run games that Salem has won. Look, both of these teams have good pitching. I like what we've seen from both of them, but you haven't seen them much in the rankings, maybe other than outside looking in, just because the lack of strength of schedule. That's where that goes back to. And so we don't really especially Melbourne with what they've done in the state tournament the past couple of years. There's no question that they do deserve their respect, but I think that I want to see what they do past this week. And that's, again, assuming that both Melbourne and Salem do get out of the regionals. I expect them to do it. I expect them to play for the final. But then also 3A4, Jared, on paper, I'm just going to say it, I expect DeWitt to tear through that. Now, Smackover is a conference team that did give them, in the 3A8, that did give them a game, I think maybe actually twice, but I know for sure once. I feel like DeWitt's going to run through that. I just don't know that they're going to be challenged. So I feel like that they will pretty much should be fine in the South is what I'm getting at. They should be fine, the 3A4 regional. And then 3A3 at Pangburn, always one that's ultra tough when the 3A6 and the 3A5 combine. So Harding Academy or Lamar, there's always, in that regional, there's always a team from each conference that does well all year, and they're going to get left out of the state tournament. This time around, it's Harding Academy and Lamar. Of course, Lamar, they got that draw because they were they got the 4 seed when they were ahead against Mayflower, but that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. So both of these teams, being Harding Academy and Lamar, they were on our outside looking in, or they've been on the outside looking in, or on the 6-7 spot pretty much all year. But, yeah, that's kind of my other main points from the other 3 regionals. So the 3A2, I expect a Melbourne-Salem final. What can one of those 2 or both do from there? DeWitt in the 3A4, I do expect them to run through that and come out of that pretty much unscathed without any issues. 3A3, ultra loaded again. Crazy that Harding Academy and Lamar are the two teams. Neither one or one of those two teams is not going to be going to the state tournament.
So I will just throw a couple of things out there because I agree with you in most part on a lot of that. Definitely, on Melbourne and Salem, I think you're right on target there. Not that there's not other talent there, but those two are looking really strong. I'm kind of with you on the DeWitt, or I am with you on the DeWitt that I think they're the strongest team there. But I will say this about that region: do not forget about Falk, because Falk has a ton of talent, and maybe they haven't shown that they can beat super tough competition so far this year. But with the talent that they have, and they were late getting into the season with a lot of basketball players that went deep into the state playoffs and all that stuff. They are playing better and better, in my opinion, here lately. So I wouldn't just not pay attention to Falk. They're a lot better team than what they've shown on paper so far this year. Definitely over in the three with Mayflower's tough, Atkins is tough, Harding and Lamar are both really good teams. Baptist Prep has showed that they can play with anybody, and they've played one of the strongest schedules in the entire state this year, and they lost a lot of games to really highly ranked teams, but were close ball games with them. Man, I tell you what, I wouldn't even begin to make a prediction on who will come out of that region. I think Mayflower is obviously probably the favorite in that, but that's a throw all 8 of them up in the air and see who shakes out. Could easily be somebody in that one that is definitely considered an upset on paper, but not necessarily an upset if you look at the talent in those rosters.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, Atkins, who's been to two back-to-back state finals, they were the 3 seed in their regional last year, and they're going into the 3 seed as the 3 seed again. So, yep, it's just all about
Lamar is a very scrappy team, and they've proven several times over the last few years that they're capable of beating anybody in the state. And I'll just say this on the way that was decided on how the seeding was for that one. I would just rather see kids on the field decide seeding versus, coaches and ADs decide it. I don't know all the circumstances. I'm not saying it was right or wrong or anything else. But anytime you have the choice, I would rather see kids competing on the field decide how the seedings shake out.
No, yeah, I think most would agree with that for sure. And Lamar, I mean, what was it? They were 60 feet away. Well, I guess they were down 4-3. I was thinking they were tied and could have walked it off, but I mean they were right. So not a home run or a scored run away from going to the finals, but they were in the semis. Had Atkins down to the wire last year. So you're right. I mean, this is a team that could go on a run, and they've been very talented again this year. That's why we've been pretty much in the Super 7 or outside looking in, I think, every single week, just because we know what kind of team they've got. And then down in Class 2A, so, the only one that we were waiting to decide, we were thinking that we were going to record before all but the 1A4 was concluded, but basically we got them all. So Riverside, unless something miraculous happens, Riverside is going to beat EPC. Of course, by the time you listen to this, it will already be over, but they're up 5-0 in the 6th inning. So I feel pretty good about that. But we'll go ahead and start with the 2A Central region, which, Jared, I know you are familiar with a lot of these teams being in the Region 5 conference, but Quitman, CAC, Bigelow, Izard County, Magnet Cove, Southside, then Mount Vernon, Enola, and Poen. So looking at some of these, you've got Quitman, that's been one of the hotter teams in Class 2A, not named Mansfield or Riverside, and maybe even a little bit of throw it in Magnet Cove. Actually, I would say probably on streak-wise, Quitman was up there with probably the Riversides and the Mansfields, but playing a CAC team that is definitely playing a lot better down the stretch. But, the Mount Vernon Enola Poen game. So MVE has been we knew we had a pretty good, strong feeling that they were going to struggle in the Circle some, at least to really start, especially because they didn't get a lot of their players back or some of their players back until basketball season, and they didn't start till after basketball in mid-March. But once again, they're a team that we had a feeling that we were going to be watching this time of year, and we certainly are. They had a close loss to Quitman in the district tournament championship the other day. But looking at that bracket, they got Poen, and then they play the winner if they win that game, Magnet Cove and Southside B Branch. And B Branch was 8-0 to start the season. Then they went to that spring break tournament in Gulf Shores and lost a few of I think that was their first losses there against a Magnet Cove team that is ultra talented, added some of those transfers in the offseason, plus had plenty coming back, but has definitely, as you have seen firsthand, is vulnerable. They are, and I think probably a lot of that is because they certainly do have a target on their back, especially in that region of the state. But this is about as competitive as a regional that if you look across the board, it's as competitive as you'll find.
Well, I was looking at this one earlier, and I would normally say I would favor Quitman over CAC as far as just on paper for sure. But CAC is as hot as anybody in the state right now. They're playing the best that they've played, all year right here at the end. They found their, mojo right here at the end of the season. And they played some really tough competition early in the year that gave them a little bit of, they are battle tested. Even though they lost some of those games, they've played some really good teams. So they've seen some good competition to help prepare them for this. Obviously, I want to say on paper that Quitman's going to win that game, but I've seen CAC in person twice this year against us, and one time they looked unbeatable. The other time we had them on the ropes and was ahead 6-1, and then we fell apart and made a lot of errors. And they are a scrappy bunch. They never quit, even when we were up 6-1. In the bottom of the fifth, we were ahead 6-1. That team never let up, and they kept finding a way to put a bat on the ball, and got to the point where we beat ourselves with a lot of mistakes. But they just kept grinding and fighting for it. And seeing what they have been doing lately, I wouldn't bet against them either. They gave Magnet Cove all they wanted in the semifinals of the district. I think that ended up being a 7-6, or maybe 8-7 ball game. Magnet Cove pulled it out, and then Izard County Bigelow. Both of those teams are extremely talented. That could easily be a toss-up game. Lots of talent in the lineups, and the McBride girl for Izard County is a really strong pitcher. Riley Starks for Bigelow has been strong for a couple of years now and really looked good. Magnet Cove Southside, on paper, I got to give it to Magnet Cove, but exactly like you said, Magnet Cove has shown that if you can figure out how to get around some of their bats, they're vulnerable. They have great pitching, Maddie Fulmer and Bella Harville, and they have some really big hitters. But if you can find a way to spin the ball, you're not going to blow it past their hitters. I can tell you that. If you throw them velocity, but it's fastballs, they're going to hit you. But if you can spin it well, you've got a chance to get around their hitters a little bit. And then Mount Vernon and Poen, man, Poen has proved that they can play, depending on the day, they can play with anybody. They have played some really good teams and played them close. And Mount Vernon was vulnerable early on the pitching side. Their pitching has really kind of strengthened up here lately. The last 2 weeks, I really have seen good things out of their pitching, but they're always been great hitting. Allie Mendoza can kill the ball. Jenna Job can kill the ball. I mean, you look up and down their lineup. The Sprague girl is a great hitter. Just everywhere you look in their lineup, they have great hitters. But their pitching has really turned the corner the last couple of weeks and really made them the team that they have been in the past, and they're very powerful. So Poen may have their hands full there, but you never know with the young talent that Poen has with Jaden Warwick and Avery Oden and several of those other players there at Poen, they're capable of beating anybody any given time.
I want to wait until the end. I want to touch on a few things for the West Regional, but I'll say on the North one, I feel pretty confident. I mean, and you can say something on this if you want to, but to me, that's Riverside's until somebody else shows me any different. I mean, because the teams that Riverside has played, I mean, in that regional, Carlisle, I mean, I know that it seems like that just about all the evidence has been scrubbed from that game, but unless you go to Riverside's Game Changer. But nonetheless, pretty much every team that Riverside has played, whether it be their conference or the 4 2/3 that they played against Carlisle, it really just hardly even touched. So I think that they're probably going to win that North Regional pretty fine. But the one that's a little bit wide open in the South, Horatio Gurdon, Woodlawn Acre, and Risen Foreman, Murfreesboro, Junction City. Now, obviously, since we haven't been seeing Lily Faye McWhorter pitch, that's been a different Woodlawn team. Now, they did get to their district final, the 2A8 district final, and they lost to Risen, which Risen has been playing some really good, but quietly been playing some really good ball in Class 2A. So I look at the North Regional, and it's pretty much Riverside still. I mean, I think that they're kind of like what I was saying about DeWitt a second ago. I do feel like that they're probably going to win that pretty handily. But normally when the South Regional tends to be more of a Woodlawn Invitational, and they're going to win it, it's wide open right now, and you probably got to go with Risen as the favorite.
I'll briefly touch on each one of those. I'm definitely with you on Riverside. I feel Riverside's probably the strongest team. Well, they are the strongest team there, short of them having an off game or something. I won't put anything past Des Arc because Des Arc has a really talented pitcher in Kaylee McDonald, and she has proven to be maybe top 2 or 3 pitcher in the state this year. So when you have a great pitcher that's capable of coming out and striking out a ton of people, you never know when they can get an upset. Pound for pound, I like Riverside, but I wouldn't put anything past Des Arc. They're capable of beating some really good teams. Carlisle has won a lot of games this year, but they haven't faced a ton of really great competition and strength of schedule yet. So they would definitely have to come up with a surprise there to get past, in my opinion, Riverside. On the South, I've been really intrigued with Horatio. They have played some pretty good teams this year. They have beaten some people this year. I like the way Risen's playing right now, and they're looking strong. Murfreesboro is always a very solid team. Like historically, they've just always found a way to win a lot of games. That's another one it's not just a given on who it's going to be. I kind of feel like it could easily be Risen, Horatio, either one, but it could be anybody in that entire region. So
then in the West, I want to touch on that before we head down to 1A. So I think that most would probably feel pretty comfortable saying that that's Mansfield to lose right there. You probably feel almost as confident as saying that you feel like that Riverside would win the North if you're a betting man or woman. So I do want to touch on Cotter real quick because they've been one of the more consistent teams over the past couple of seasons. Like, this is a group, this 2024 class, there's been, I think, about 5 or 6 that have played together for a while, whether it be travel ball. And, of course, at Cotter, they've all just kind of been a little bit of a group and have been a good group. They won 7 games as a sophomore, then won 17 games last year. They fell to Mount Vernon and Nola in the state tournament. But they lost to Marshall last week. That was their regular season finale, their conference finale, basically decide the top 2 seeds in the district tournament that just happened. So they lost to Marshall, Cotter did, by a run. A little bit of a controversial game, I know. And then they ended up getting a little bit of redemption, getting a good bit of redemption in the district finals. They beat Marshall, Cotter did, in 8 innings. So got that number 1 seed going in. So you got on the opposite side of Mansfield, which is exactly what you're trying to do in that regional. But Jared, Zoe Donahue, I know this is a pitcher that we've talked about a little bit, kind of throwing her name around. We talk about some of the pitchers in the area, but really good both offensively and defensively. I know that she had moved here from out of state. I'm not even going to say the state because I know I'll get it wrong, but 13-3 on the year, 124 strikeout, but she's also batting 472, got 15 RBI. So then Grayson Jackson's one that's batting 433, McKenna Collins 388. So they've got some pretty consistent bats. You look through their entire lineup and you'll see a lot of 320, 330, 340 plus. And then, like I said, a couple of those in the high 300s into the 400s. But that's one thing we always say. I always love to talk about the strength of schedule, but I do love to talk about consistency. Those are probably the two things that people hear from me that listen to us or listen to me, read my works a lot, read my publications. But that's something to be said too, is this is not a historically great program. I think last year was really when Cotter started setting some of their marks as the most wins in a season, the longest win streaks in school history. Well, now they're trying to get over the hump and get that first. Now you got to win that first round regional game, but they're also now trying to get over that hump, get to the state tournament, and win a state tournament game. So this 2024 class definitely deserves some recognition for what they have done for Cotter, especially over the past two seasons.
Yeah, I didn't know hardly anything about Cotter at all, and I've gotten some stats and seen a few things here lately, and I definitely have been impressed with the stats for Zoe Donahue. Um, I think honestly, if there's a team in that regional, actually, I think there's two teams in that regional that have a chance to possibly even upset Mansfield. Mansfield's my favorite for sure, but Cotter or Lavaca would be the two that would have a chance. But I really like Cotter, the way they're playing and what I've seen out of them. Definitely a new team for me to be learning about and seeing stats and things like that. But they have proven that they're a solid team that deserve to be recognized. And I think that Cotter has the real chance to be in the championship there against Mansfield. Mansfield, I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody else that's in the game, but Mansfield is just, they look really tough, and I'm never going to bet against Allison Edwards. So she is just a really special talent with a lot of ability, and you got to prove you can beat her before you can talk about anybody else beating Mansfield.
And then down in Class 1A, last but not least, big question is, other than can anybody dethrone Taylor and their quest for a seventh consecutive state championship, can it be them? If it is, or who's it going to be that will take them down? If it is, it'll probably be Bradley. Bradley knows them more than anybody. They've also got probably the top pitcher in Class 1A. When you talk about just overall, they're definitely in the conversation, and Ainsley Moore. But if there's any team other than Bradley, I think that Concord certainly deserves its due. And just looking at that ending, Jared, we knew that this 1A2 district, we talk about it every single season, just how crazy that conference is. And then once you get into districts and regionals, it just gets even wilder. And so the big question last week, who was going to win between Calico Rock and Greers Ferry Westside that was going to get that automatic bid to the regionals, and then who was going to get left home? Greers Ferry Westside won that. Then they lost 7-6 to Concord in the semifinal game. Shirley and Viola came to another tight matchup in the semifinals on that side. And then Shirley was up 12-3 going into the bottom of the seventh over Concord in the finals, pretty much looking like they were going to just skate to a victory and win the district championship. And then lo and behold, Concord puts 9 runs up. And I don't know that I've seen that in a seventh inning in a game of this big of a meaning in a high school game before. If I have, it's been quite some time. But Concord just showing what they have shown all season, the resiliency, the consistency. I believe they're now 19-1 coming into this week. They beat Quitman 4-0 last week. So all respect to Taylor and Bradley, but I think, and this is my fault, I don't think we've talked about Concord quite enough this year.
I agree with you. I saw that score and saw where people were talking about it was 12-3, and then it ended up flipping, and Concord got the win. If a team can scrap back from that deficit in the last inning, it's hard to say anything against them. I mean, that's a lot of grit, a lot of heart, lot of wanting it real bad. And I know without a doubt that there were some mistakes made late in that game, by Shirley, and that factored into it too. But you still got to put a bat on the ball before mistakes can be made. So Concord found a way to put a bat on the ball and just grind their way back. Uh, every one of those that you talked about, that whole region is just loaded with ability and talent. There's a great team there for Concord. There's a really solid team for Viola. Westside has proven to be a scrappy team, and Shirley has played really well this year. And there's several others there, and it's like, man, that's a pretty loaded little regional, and that's another one where there could be upsets. But I like Concord. I like what they're doing. Outside of that, when you get over to the Taylor regional, Taylor, I don't see anybody other than Bradley having a chance in that regional with Taylor and Bradley. They beat each other up several times last year. They've been really close games between them this year. Ainsley Moore is definitely capable of playing, against anybody in the state and coming out victorious. Whether it's Taylor or 6A or whatever, she can throw the ball with the best of them. She's one of the best in the state. So you never know what can shake out there. But outside of Bradley and Taylor, I just don't see anyone else having a chance to pull anything out of that regional. No disrespect to those teams, but they're just outgunned with those two teams, it looks like to me.
By the way, 10-0 Riverside over East Poinsett County. So Riverside officially, as we're recording, as I've said throughout the show, recording on a Monday night. So we've kind of been keeping up with that score as we go through the classes. So East Poinsett County will be the number 1 seed out of the 2A3. So also in that Concord-Shirley matchup, the top 4 Concord batters, Caitley Cornett, Ashlyn Cossey, Brianna McPike, and Savannah Glover, some names that we've mentioned many, many times throughout the years. They combined to go 10 for 17 with 7 RBIs. So when you're top 4, when anybody in your lineup combines for that, but especially when you're top 4, you're going to be in some pretty good shape. So really my biggest question is, Jared, so you put your coaching hat on here and your team is up really big like that, then you get a 9 spot put on you and get walked off in the 7th. Do you feel more confident that you're going to use that as fuel and it's going to drive you, or that's going to cause you to shut down and you lose in the first round of regional?
Well, I think you have to know your girls and know how to try to take that and use it as motivation. And on any given team that I've ever coached, some girls have that ability to flip and go, man, that just lit a fire under me and we're going to find a way to get it done. And they can. And then some teams, their personality is they just beat us even when we had them way down. We just can't beat this team. And it'll tell you a lot about a team's heart and their attitudes and kind of where their mindset is, the mentality that they have and how they respond when you get that chance again. I've seen it just absolutely kill teams, and I've seen it light a fire under teams. And you just gotta know your players. You gotta know how, as a coach, you gotta know how to try to work that angle and try to light that fire. I've seen it go both ways, and on any given day, I've seen the same group of girls, a game like that affect them differently. It just depends on the day of the week and how things worked out. It's so crazy, especially I think coaching girls more so than boys. Coaching young ladies, man, every day is a different day, and so it's a lot of fun to coach young ladies, but man, it can also be really frustrating when you just never know what you're going to get from day to day.
It sounds like raising them. You just never know. That's kind of where I'm at. Of course, my 2-year-old, you never know what you're going to get, man. Sometimes I'll wake up and she wants to just gives me hugs and again give me all this loving, and then there's sometimes she just wants to punch me in the face, and she does it. So, or kicks me in the face. It just depends. But yeah, that sounds pretty familiar. But before we do close it out, speaking of Ainsley Moore, 600 career strikeouts she went over last week. Also has 8 home runs on the year. She's a back-to-back 1A state champion discus thrower. Now, that got moved. It was supposed to be Tuesday. I think this state or maybe it's the overall, but those got moved to Wednesday, I'm pretty sure. So, man, already does really well in basketball or does really well in softball. Ainsley's also killing it in track. Also, her fellow senior, which I believe Ainsley and Emily Lyons are the only seniors on Bradley's team. She's got 30 stolen bases on the year. So both the Bradley Lady Bear seniors doing really well so far. Other milestones, talked about Brinkley Morton earlier, 800 career strikeouts. I think she will, without question, hit 1,000 before it's said and done. Kaylee McDonald, also mentioned her from Des Arc, 400 strikeouts. I can't remember if we mentioned that on last week's show. Emma Day, hadn't talked a lot about her from Mountain View, another sophomore that's put up crazy numbers. She is at 400 strikeouts. Now, that Mountain View season ended in the district tournament. I believe they lost to Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken. But she went over 400 strikeouts. And then Zoe Lockaby from Mineral Springs, 200. She's a sophomore, 200 strikeouts in 18 varsity games. So wanted to give those milestones out. Jared, I don't know if you have any extras. I know you get some stuff sent to you as well.
I know it hasn't been talked a lot about publicly, but I know Emery Boland passed 700 this last week, and I think now she's sitting like maybe 710 range, 715, something like that. For the season this year, Jaylee hit 200 in her last game, Jaylee Hawthorn, and she's real close to 600 career now. Probably hit that, first game or two next year. Then there was a couple others, but I know Kaylee McDonald was one I was going to bring up. So definitely a lot of talented pitchers. Brinkley Morton hitting 800. That's just insane. As a junior, going to go well over 1,000, in her career.
Lexi Franklin should be. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Lexi, she's around 950.
She's over 900. I think she's going to be real close to 1,000 for her career.
If they go to state again,
amazing.
If they go to the finals, she's going to hit 1,000. Maybe before
I don't
that.
know her numbers, but Allison Edwards has got to be really high up there. So that was one that I think she's over 600 career now. Maybe
she is, and I'm glad you brought her up. So Coach Eveld and I were texting last week. This was last Tuesday that he sent me this. So going into last week, in her career, Allison Edwards had faced 1,942 batters, so she's coming up on 2,000. Struck out 840 of them. That's 43% of the batters she's faced. She has struck out going into last week. So that's going to win you a lot of games, and that'll get you to a lot of state finals, and she's been to a state finals in 2 of the past 3 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. 43% for career is very impressive. I've seen several individual players get close to 50% for a season. Jaylee's actually been right at 50% twice now, but for her career, she's about 40 to 41%. 43% for a career is really getting it done. That's impressive.
And Allison too. She does play travel softball, but she goes from volleyball directly to basketball, from basketball directly to softball. And there's other, Lexi goes from basketball to softball too. I'm not saying that there's not other multi-sport athletes, but to play 3 sports at that high of a level. I mean, look, I'm just going to say it. As of right now, I don't have a vote on Female Athlete of the Year. And I know that's based on this year alone, but when you just look at Allison Edwards' overall career, I mean, she's got to be up there at the top for Female Athlete of the Year.
She's a all-state, all-American type performer in 3 sports. So it's crazy when you look at her ability and across the board in all 3 of the sports that she plays. I mean, she's one of those kids that she is just an amazing athlete. She's a great hitter. She's a great pitcher. She's anything you throw at her, she seems to excel at athletically. So definitely one of the best female athletes to ever come out of Arkansas.
And if you like what you were just listening to, be sure and subscribe. We actually had a much smoother ride. I guess I can go ahead and say that we're almost to the end than we had with baseball. For those that didn't hear the baseball episode, I had a really big scare this morning on Monday morning, all of my stuff crashed. My soundboard, my laptop, my $15 ring light that I didn't really care about. But, yeah, I thought that thousands of dollars worth of stuff was done for. So, luckily, we're good to go. We got through the podcast this week and got through another week. We've got next week that we'll preview the state tournament. Then we'll recap the state finals, and we're still going to do some softball and baseball stuff on into the summer, especially with some of the college. We'll kind of talk about that maybe next week. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the early summer plans. But other than that, make sure you head to naturalstatesports.com. That's where we'll have the rankings for softball on Tuesday this week with the couple of games that were really having a big factor on the rankings. Wanted to wait a day, but baseball, of course, are out too. And then we've got coverage throughout. You'll probably more so on Twitter /X. You'll see some of us posting stuff for the regional tournaments, and then I'll have as much as I can have complete coverage of the state tournaments and then state finals. That I'll be at that. So. Other than that, Jared, we'll go ahead and close this baby out unless you got something else.
Just a quick shout out to a couple of kids that I know are seniors this year that we haven't talked a lot about that have had really strong individual seasons, but their teams have not been all that great, and we may get a chance to talk about one of them. But Cadence Collins has been one of the best hitters in the state of Arkansas for her entire career. We haven't got to mention her a lot this year because her team hasn't had the best season, but she has quietly put together one of the best hitting careers ever in the state of Arkansas. Great kid, deserves some praise. And another one is Lily Tatum at Danville. Really good ball player, great athlete, great kid. Another one that her team has not had a chance to be, in the 7 or 8 teams that we've talked about a lot, but just 2 really good kids that have hit really well and put together great careers. And just want to give them a quick shout out.
If you're watching on YouTube and you have not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? Make sure you hit that subscribe button and then hit the notification so that way you will know when we release an episode each week. Other than that, also subscribe on the audio if you prefer it that way while you're on the way to a game or doing some work on the field, doing some work around the house. You can just put your earbuds in, AirPods, and listen away. But that will do it for episode 8 for Jared Hawthorn and all of us here at Natural State Sports. My name is Kyle Sutherland. We will catch you next week.